Welcome to Kathryn Raakers' World. Innovation, culture, adventure, fashion and health, artists, destinations, traditions. This is Kathryn Raakers' World.
Hi, this is Kathryn Raaker of Kathryn Raakers' World, a syndicated TV show, and Let's Just Talk, a syndicated radio show. I have the honor of having Brenda Tracy, survivor and founder of the Set the Expectation, STE. Set the Expectation is a national nonprofit dedicated to ending sexual and interpersonal violence. Welcome to our show, Brenda. I mean, how long did it take you to start your nonprofit? And would you tell my audience why this is such an important nonprofit?
So I am a survivor of sexual assault. In 1998, as a young woman, I was assaulted by 4 college football players.
Oh.
And so I went through a whole ordeal back then. But 16 years later, I went public with my story. And I started traveling the country, working with athletics, football players, football teams, a lot of men. I believe men are the solution. We can talk about that a little bit later. But it was probably 2017, 2016 that I recognized that, we just needed to set expectations about behavior. At just kind of a fundamental level, can we just set the expectation that sexual assault and physical violence are not acceptable and not okay? And so I started the nonprofit in 2017. Really out of need, not really out of want. I never really wanted to run a nonprofit, but there was definitely a need there. And so Set the Expectation was born.
And so how many people work with you today in making a difference against sexual violence and interpersonal violence? Tell me that.
Well, we're very tiny. We call ourselves small but mighty. We're a national organization. We work all over the country, but it's really me. I have an executive director, Liz Anderson, who runs the nonprofit side, and some volunteers, some really amazing volunteers that help us with everything. So we're very much a grassroots organization, always in need of funding, always in need of people to, check us out, go to the website, figure out, how they can help. But we're small, but we're mighty. We get a lot of work done.
Right. Well, this, unfortunately, it still happens across the country, doesn't it? In colleges and different.
Oh, all the time.
All the time. How can we change the minds of people that think that, a lot of these different things that are normal and they're not? And how you deal with it as a young woman, it must have been unbelievable for you to get over the pain and the mental part of it. Am I correct?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I still struggle to this day. I mean, I travel the country and I share my story and my experiences. And so I think one of the things we need to really talk about is, these are issues of humanity. I think that, women are disproportionately affected by sexual violence, but anyone can be, the victim of sexual assault, sexual abuse. So these are issues of humanity. Certain groups are disproportionately affected. I think most of the time the perpetrator is male, but most men don't commit sexual violence, right? So when we hear that whole, not all men, technically that's true.
Right.
Not all men do this. The problem is that the majority of men who don't do these things, they're still complicit in their silence. They're still complicit in their inaction. And they're not really part of making sure that our communities are safe. All the work has been left to those who are most affected. So when we think about the LGBTQ community, women and girls, it's kind of like the people most affected are in charge of fixing it. And what I tell people is if women alone or the communities most affected by sexual violence could fix it, we would have already done it. I would have fixed this myself. We can't do it alone. Men have to get involved. And so I think that's a super important conversation that we need to have more often, is how do we engage good men to align themselves and with, organizations doing the work, people like me, and get all the good people, right, involved to decide that we can live in violence-free communities.
Right. And, it's not just in colleges and universities, it's everywhere. It's in churches, it's in every part of society. Am I correct?
Yes, this is an epidemic, and it always has been. The numbers are not getting better. I mean, I think that one of the biggest shifts we've seen is more conversation, and more, involvement and that kind of thing. But the numbers really have not changed. They're just as bad as they were back when I was assaulted, and these things still happen. I mean, I think it's only less than 1% of sexual assault cases are even prosecuted.
And that's the saddest part of it, is they aren't prosecuted. And, women and girls are sometimes really frightened about bringing it forward or ashamed.
Yes.
Am I correct about that?
Oh, yeah. And we should be afraid to speak out, because the system is not built to help us. It's not built to support us or hold perpetrators accountable. So it's kind of like, when people say things like, well, why don't you report? Why don't you step forward? Why don't you this and that? And the question for me is always, why would we? If you know that nothing's going to happen, if you know that you're going to be victim blamed, you're going to be shamed, your perpetrator's not going to be held accountable, why would you put yourself through that process? I mean, we have to fix the system so that people feel empowered to come forward and hold these perpetrators accountable.
When you went through it yourself, did you prosecute these football players?
So I did everything that I thought a good victim was supposed to do. I went to the police. I reported immediately. I went to the hospital. I got a rape kit done. I reported it to the school. What I was told at the time, the men were arrested immediately. But then what I was told by the DA's office was that it was going to be a very, very hard case for me to win. I would have to go through 4 separate trials. It would take years. My rape kit would be made available to the public, which meant that all the photos of, my body would be made public. And the DA said to me, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And at the time, I thought I was making an informed decision, and I decided not to cooperate anymore, because if I couldn't win, why would I put myself through that, more trauma? And so I stopped cooperating with the DA. And then at that point, it was a media story. And my community said, see, we told you she was lying. If there was really an assault or this happened, of course, the DA would prosecute. And then I found out 16 years later through an investigation that the DA had taped confessions of all 4 men. And I was not told that at the time.
Wow.
So, and my rape kit was thrown in the trash by the police and not tested. So I found out all of this information 16 years later, and then kind of made it my mission to make sure that what happened to me couldn't happen to another person. So I've since then changed several laws in Oregon regarding rape kits, the statute of limitations to prosecute and that kind of thing. And that, in addition to the work I do across the country of trying to engage and empower men to get involved.
Right, because if you have them plus women, you have something to really stand up and say, listen, this shouldn't happen to me. This shouldn't happen to my family. This shouldn't happen to my daughter, my granddaughter. I mean, when you think about all of it, you think about this could be in your own family and you need to do something about it. You need to stand up.
Oh, yeah, with anybody. And I mostly work with young men and a lot in sports, but I'll tell you, every time I'm in a football team room, there is a young man there who has been sexually abused or assaulted or harassed or something like that. I mean, I think even right now in the news, sports media, we're talking about the school Northwestern and how they have this culture and they call it hazing.
Yes.
But there was sexual abuse and assault going on in that locker room, and they call it hazing because it's male on male, which is wrong. I mean, you need to call it what it is. But this can literally happen to anybody. And we need to understand that. We need to understand that it's really not divisive in the way of, men against women or, this group against the LGBTQ community. It's the good people against the people committing these crimes.
Right.
And all of it is preventable. 100% of this is preventable. It doesn't have to happen to anybody.
That's right. And that's the most important thing, I think. It can happen overseas. It can happen. It can happen anywhere. And
you are military. The numbers in the military
right.
are just disgusting. And a lot of those victims are men as well. I mean, this can happen to anyone, and it does. It does. And I'm fed up with it, quite frankly. I'm dedicating my entire life to trying to save people from going through what I went through. And I think that most survivors, I think that's what they want too. They don't want anyone to go through what they went through.
And, I can say that I know people that it's happened to, that we stood up for. And, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on my show, because I really believe that you have a message that you can really change, and we can change what happens to our children, our grandchildren, ourselves. And
yes.
It can happen at any time to anyone. And I see it happening to seniors too. That's really sad. And I beat them up and do all kinds of terrible things to them. Let me ask you, when did you start Tracy's Rule? And tell us a little bit about that.
So Tracy, the Tracy Rule is a serious misconduct policy, and you find it on a college campus. So the NCAA is the regulatory agency over college athletics. And so they have, a 400-page rule book about what athletes can and can't do. It used to be you couldn't pay an athlete. That was against the NCAA rules. That was a violation. But sexual assault and rape are not NCAA violations. So even within the athlete membership of the NCAA, there is violence going on within their membership group. And then obviously there's, athlete on non-student, violence happening on our campuses. Athletes are actually 3 times more likely to be part of a Title IX process on a campus than a non-student. But the NCAA has chosen intentionally not to get involved with the issue. So I've created my own serious misconduct policy. And so if an athlete, they have to attest each year to their history, if they've been part of, a police investigation, if they have a Title IX process going on, if they transfer schools, they have to give that information to the new school. And if you're found in violation of the Tracy Rule, so if you have like a criminal conviction or found responsible through a school process, you lose your eligibility to play sports.
Wow, that's absolutely great. Let me ask you, what's been your proudest accomplishment with Set the Expectation?
Oh gosh,
got a lot, right? Really.
I think that for me, I'm going to say James Smith Williams, and he plays for the Washington Commanders. He's an NFL football player. I met him several years ago on the NC State campus. He was in college, and I shared my story and my call to action. And James immediately got involved with community service and helping agencies that help survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. And he has just grown into this amazing ambassador for our Set the Expectation campaign. He uses his voice to, call out people, hold them accountable. He does so much work in the DC area. He does, a Thanksgiving dinner for women and children in a shelter. He does a toy drive to make sure every child living in domestic violence sheltered housing gets a toy every year. Back to school stuff. He just is this amazing light. And I think for me, the goal is to engage men and get men involved. And so he's just a shining example of that, and just kind of this dream I had in the beginning. He's kind of the fruition of that. And so I hope to amass many, many, many Jameses across the country. But I would say James is probably one of the things I'm most proud of.
We have to take a little short break, and then we'll be right back on Kathryn Raakers World and Let's Just Talk. Would you give your website for people?
Yeah, so the website is settheexpectation.org.
All right. And we'll be right back on Kathryn Raakers World and Let's Just Talk with Brenda Tracy and the survivor and founder of Set the Expectation. We are back on Kathryn Raakers World and Let's Just Talk with Brenda Tracy, survivor and founder of Set the Expectation. Set the Expectation is a national nonprofit dedicated to ending sexual and interpersonal violence. Let me ask this one question of you. When you've approached some of these colleges, have they given you a hard time at all or any grief in what you want to do?
So I mostly just work with colleges that reach out to me first.
Right.
I don't do a lot of solicitation. I really want to be where I'm wanted.
Yes,
And
not
so
where you're not wanted, right?
Yeah, I feel like when the school reaches out to me, that means that they're hopefully being proactive and, want to do more than just check a box, but they really want me there. And so I would say that, over the years, the response to my story and my call to action has been overwhelmingly positive.
Right.
I will say that over the years, there have been opportunities for schools to do the right thing in the moment, and they don't. And so I have been disappointed multiple times over the years about kind of the inaction of some of the schools and administration. But I also understand that, for me, this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And so I think that, over time, incrementalism is a thing. And I just have to remember that, you sometimes move ahead very slowly. Turning the ship doesn't happen immediately.
Right.
And so I just continue to stay the course and stay the path and stay positive, and understand that, what's going on today is different from 5 years ago, and what will be going on 5 years ahead of time could be different. And so you just never know, you just keep on working and working and working. And eventually I think you meet the right people and the right timing, the circumstances. And eventually I know that I'm on the right side of history. I know what I'm doing is a good thing and the right thing. And so I think if I keep pressing forward, it'll pay off.
Do you have survivors that contact you and
all the time?
All the time. And do you have different classes and different things that you do with them or work with them? How do you help your survivors?
So I meet a lot of survivors on the campuses that I go to. I always take time to, if they reach out to me, I respond. I talk with them, on campus. I usually give like all my insights as far as like how I've navigated my own journey of healing, how I've navigated this space of like advocacy work, all that. I try to give back to them as much as I can. I also think that, my way of helping survivors is to work with men. I mean, I think one of the best ways to help our women and girls is to help our men and boys. And
Right.
So while I don't always work directly with the survivor or directly with women and girls all the time, and I do, but not all the time, my passion is working with men. I think that that's where prevention work really happens, is working with men and boys, right? If this is the space where education is needed and, allyship and that kind of thing, I think that it's really important.
And a lot of those young boys and young men have been maybe abused themselves and know the difference. And you find that in your work all the time, don't you?
Oh, yeah. I meet survivors everywhere I go. There's never a room I walk in that there's not survivors.
Somebody, or that
they're everywhere.
And with you talking about it, they come out. It's a lot easier for them to come out and talk about it, right?
Yes, and that is so amazing and amazingly sad at the same time, right? It's both things for me, because I feel like, I stand in front of a room for an hour and I deliver education or talk about my story. And then sometimes I'm the first person that someone has ever disclosed to. And I find that really sad. I think we need to really create communities where survivors feel safe to report and to share their stories. I just, I'm someone that they've seen for an hour. And because I have the same experience, they know that they can talk to me. But it seems sad to me that I would be the person that they would open up to and not have someone else in their life that they can talk to.
Well, a lot of times they don't tell their parents, they don't tell their friends, they just keep it inside
Because
and
of
it
shame.
just eats at them. And, when somebody comes in like yourself that they've never met before and they hear your story, it's a lot easier, I think, to tell you than it would be to tell somebody else. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Me though.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. But I also think that's where we also have to address that issue, right? With society and making sure, because we should be able to go to our loved ones and talk to them. We should be able to, without fear of shame, being shamed or victim blamed or, those kinds of things. And victim blaming is so prevalent in our society. What were you doing there? What were you wearing? Were you drinking? All that stuff. We just got to get rid of that.
Right. We need to get rid of that because a lot of times drinks are spiked. You may not even know that you've been spiked. All kinds of things happen all the time. And that's the sad part. And, I think a lot of parents really get really frightened when their kids go to college because they don't know a lot of the things that are going on. But let me say this, as a parent and a grandmother and a great grandmother, I always want to know, and my kids or my grandchildren can come to me anytime and tell me what's going on. And they shouldn't feel ashamed of it. That's the other thing, shame. We have shamed people about it. And it's, it isn't anything to be shamed about. It's the other person shamed, right? So,
and I think that's even just a conversation we need to have with our children, right? Like the fact that you just said that, like say that to your children. Should something happen, you can come to me and talk to me about it. I will not shame you. I will not blame you. I'm just, I believe you. You did nothing wrong. What can I do to support you? I want to be there for you. Those are the most important things that we have to say to survivors.
And start young with kids, grandchildren. I mean, seriously, because, Stranger Danger was a wonderful book for children that a friend of mine published. And it's been national for a long time. And that's what I think you need to do. Talk to your kids more, sit down with them, be with them. And even though we all work and we all have this problem, I think that kids are shamed so early in life, especially with social media and whatever. It's sad. So
and I think too, when we talk about children, we really need to have the discussion around how most of them know their perpetrator. So it's family, it's a close friend, it's someone they know. And I believe the statistic is up to like 90% of children know who their offender is. And so that makes it even more complicated for them to talk about it or to disclose it because it's someone that everyone knows.
Right. And the other thing is, tell us what your upcoming events are so that we know. And there's a calendar out there on when you're going to be at different places. Am I correct?
Or not? I don't think it's public. I don't always say where I'm going to. I also
I get it.
I deal with a lot of kind of vitriol and that kind of thing, so I don't always disclose everywhere that I'm at. But yeah, I have an event. Be working with the University of Florida football pretty soon. We have a Set the Expectation football game happening at Yale coming up. James, our ambassador for Set the Expectation, will be doing a back to school drive. We have our other so that's part of our champions program. They're ambassadors for our organization. Andy Sullivan is in the playing soccer right now at the World Cup right now. So that's a big deal for one of our ambassadors. So yeah, we have different events coming up. You can go to the website and find out more. And then you go there and donate too.
Yeah, that's really important to donate to this.
Shamelessly plug the donate button.
Yes. I mean, seriously.
Projects take money.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I'm going to do for you if you don't care. I'll put you on. I'll put your nonprofit, since I work for 3 nonprofits myself, and put your nonprofit up on our websites, because I think what you're doing is really making a difference. And I mean, your parents must be extremely proud of you.
They are. Yeah, my sons too. Yeah, my parents and my sons. Yeah, they are proud of me.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. And I want to thank you so much for joining me. And if you'll ask the publicist to send your logo and whatever,
Sure.
and I'll make sure you get on all of our programming because you have such
Thank
an
you.
important message. And I just have to say, I commend you for what you're doing. You
Thank you
stand
so
up,
much.
you're not afraid, and that's exciting. I want to thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And give that website out again, please.
Settheexpectation.org.
And don't forget to go to our website at KathrynRaakersWorld.com and let's just talk. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.